Hey everybody, and on The Fan Awakens today, we're going to be talking about the comic book Star Wars Kanan, The Last Padawan, issues 1 through 5. Okay, I'm not going to break down each of these issues, one by one exactly, but I do want to talk about the first issue of the series because that was really, really fantastic, and it's one of my favorite comic book reads ever, which I haven't had many, of course. It starts off with the crew of the Ghost, and there's Kanan, and the whole crew's in the cockpit, and they're saying, where they're going to be going, and they find out that it's a planet called Kalar, and Kanan goes into sort of a flashback mode, and that's how it sort of like creates the bookend for this comic book series. And it was really cool because we got to see Kanan as a young Padawan. His name is Caleb Doom, which we've come across in the book A New Dawn, and he's on this planet Kalar, and he's with his master Depa Billaba. It's really interesting. They give a little backstory. He's talking a little bit. There's a narration going on in his head. He talks a little bit about Depa Billaba, and he briefly mentions her past, which I know is a reference to a book that I haven't read, but I know it's a popular book. I can't remember what it's called right now, but where she had some crazy mental issues or something like that, supposedly, and I know it was interesting that they referenced that because kind of pointing out that not all Legends material is out of play. But this was cool because we got to see everything going on. We got to see him in the Clone Wars, got to see a little bit of interaction with some characters we don't really know in the Clone Wars, with some clones we don't really know, and then it leads right up to the beginning of Order 66. I mean, they're sitting there and they're having a good an evening rest after a hard day of fighting, and their Commander Gray, receives the order from Palpatine, execute Order 66, and that's how it ends. And I was like, this, man, that was cool. And one of the things people talk about a lot with Star Wars in general that has come up, and I mean, but mostly initially because of the odd way George Lucas put out the movies, the original trilogy followed by the prequel trilogy, that we run into things like that with Clone Wars, with Rebels, with the prequel trilogy, where we feel like we know what's coming. So the shows, instead of really driving to a big ending, you kind of know what's going to happen. You have to play around in the middle of it to sort of figure out, how did these things happen, sort of thing. And this is, I like that. I think that's something that Star Wars manages to do that other stories or other shows or other movies don't necessarily get to do, and it works really well here. So we know Order 66 is a thing. We know it's happened, or we know it's gonna happen, and yet we get to kind of keep diving back in to see it from a different experience. I'd like to see more of it. I would love to see comic books or whatever of many different Jedi and what happened to them during Order 66. I feel like that would be really cool. So that by itself, just seeing Order 66 happen from a new perspective was really awesome. But then it's like the cliffhanger to end all cliffhangers. And you feel like it's that was the perfect place to leave off because we needed just a little bit of that, and then we're going to move on. So that was cool. Now, the thing about cliffhangers, and I mean, I don't know how big a deal this is in the comic book world exactly. It's like one of the things I had a little trouble with this comic early on in the next two episodes, where they end on not really cliffhangers, but they end on big moments, and then the next issue starts and picks up right there, but it seems like in both cases they kind of just sort of reset, and I felt like it bothered me a little. In the second issue, Kanan goes all the way back. Kanan leaves Kalar after he's met his he meets Janus Casimir. He meets him, which becomes kind of the main focal point of the whole series. But he steals a ship. He takes off to get back to Coruscant, and then, right at the end, he sort of finds out, oh crap, I'm screwed, what do I do? And then you're like, oh, this is tense. And then when you wait a month, you get the next issue, and within about 2 pages, he's right back on Kalar talking to Janus Casimir. And so it's sort of like, reset. you know. And then it sort of did the same thing at the end of issue 3, you know, where there was a big sort of like moment where you think that Casimir is betraying him, and then right at the beginning of issue 4, you're like, no, it was just a joke. It's okay. So I don't know, these things sort of frustrated me a little bit when I read them and then had to wait a month, and then within 2 pages you're like right back to where you were. But I read them again, and I read them all 1 through 5 again, and it doesn't feel like that. So I kind of wonder if maybe if it's a comic book, just a comic book, sort of like a standard device in comic books that I'm just not used to yet, or if it's more specific to this one. But it just I found that frustrating a little bit. It was just enough to sort of nag at me. That's it. Like, that's my only complaint. I thought, and it's not even a complaint, it may just be more about me. I thought this series from start to finish was great. And I mean, I continue to say how much I love Kanan. Kanan is so interesting. He is, without a doubt, and it's not just me. I mean, I think fandom in general, people are really gravitating to Kanan a lot. So, yeah, I think his style and his circumstance, being this sort of bridge between the first trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and the older trilogy, I think just really, really like puts him in just a perfect place to be this like mixture of a good, like an Obi-Wan and a Han Solo almost. And so it's great. I mean, to see where he came from, to see how he developed, to see how he basically took his name, was really good. And the it played out a little bit for a little while. They have these 2 clones, Commander Gray and Captain Styles, who are basically tracking them. And there was a period of a bit of a time jump, I think, in issue number 4, where it explains that Casimir and Caleb are doing sort of like crimes. They're going around and they're making scores a little bit, trying to stay one step ahead of the 2 clones that are tracking them. And it felt, for a minute there, it felt like, like, I don't know, almost like the A-Team, or like, Kung Fu, or one of those older shows where you have some, a group or somebody who's being hunted by people, and they move from place to place to place. And I could see a TV show, like an older style TV show, Kanan and Casimir on the run from the clones who are after them. And every episode they wander into some new planet or some village or whatever, and they end up helping somebody, and then they're like, got to stay one step ahead of the clones. That was like a cool idea. But it was really cool. I liked that a lot. I really liked where it was going, and this bond that they developed between these 2 characters was pretty interesting. And basically takes, through most of it for them to actually realize that they have a bond. And then the fifth issue that just came out, sort of sums up this arc. And I know Greg Weisman said that initially it was just going to be a limited series, a 1 through 5, a 5-issue series that provided backstory for Kanan, and that somewhere along the line they decided to make it a long series. And you could tell, this episode, or this last issue, ended with Kanan sort of like, with Hera sort of like, snap out of it, you're having a flashback. And it's basically like the origin story of Kanan, where he goes from being the Padawan at Route 66 at Order 66. He goes from being the Padawan at Order 66, and and then has to fight his way to establish a little bit of footing in the universe as an ex-Jedi, and in the end he does that, and he has to get rid of his friend, and that's harsh. That felt harsh, and he basically, feels like he's going to get this guy killed eventually, and maybe that's true, maybe it's not. And Casimir calls him out and says, you're just afraid of losing people, and maybe he is. And I think we know from A New Dawn and a little bit in Rebels that that the next 10 years of Kanan's life are not, they're not happy. They're not happy times. He's going to become a rough and tough kind of dude. And so in the end, I mean, I guess that'll be the interesting thing. Where is this going to go? the preview page on the end of the book, you know, shows the crew of the Ghost, and it says next issue coming out in September. And you know, I'm like curious, is it going to be Rebels, you know, related, or are we going to stay in this flashback mode or whatever? I hope we stay with young Kanan. I really want to see more of that. I'm more interested in Kanan for this, you know, than I am the crew of the Ghost in general. We have Rebels for that. So I hope it will continue that back there. That said, it says they're going to the planet Kalar, you know, here in the present or whatever time you want to call it. So it is kind of interesting. I'd like to see them land and Kanan as an adult return there and see if anything happens with that. So again, you know, we'll see. I have no idea where it's going to go, but from start to finish, you know, as a complete arc, I mean, this was fantastic. It was really great. I mean, I don't know if it's the best of all the ones I've read so far. It's really, really good. But the most important thing here is that Kanan continues to just be like a top-notch Star Wars character. I mean, really, just top-notch. Star Wars fans need to know Kanan. Like, Star Wars fans need to not be ignoring him, because he is excellent. And I don't know how Rebels is going to end, of course, but man, I really hope they tie him into something larger, so that he can really, really make some waves to the regular Star Wars fans, the movie-only Star Wars fans, somehow be of significance. I don't know if that makes any sense for him to be in any of the movies or not. Certainly not, probably not Episode 7 or 8 or 9 or anything, but in some way, man, I really feel like Kanan needs to become relevant to a much larger group of people, because he's too good for that. Yeah, so that's it for a comic book review for Kanan for now. So please subscribe and check back later for more comic book reviews and more forays into previously undiscovered bits of fandom for me. And until next time, may the Force be with you.